Welcome to the Next Level Podcast, powered by San Manuel, a series connecting you with the best minds in casino, hospitality, tribal government, and beyond. Enjoy the show.
Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to chat with you today. Full transparency, you came and spoke to our group at Yamava and San Manuel, and so many of our team members left inspired. So we thought, you know what, let's get Sarah on the podcast. If we're all about helping people in their careers, who better than Sarah? So as I said before I started recording, it's been a minute since I've done a podcast, and you're the host of Prospecting on Purpose. So you might have to help me through this conversation, but just to start, thank you for joining today.
Oh, I feel so honored to be here. I'm a really big fan of the show too. I've learned a lot from listening to the Next Level podcast. So thanks for putting it out there. It's great content.
Appreciate that. And, I'm really appreciative of the content you put out there. But for those who are curious to know the Sarah, as we like to call it, the origin story, the quick 3-minute, kind of what do we need to know about your career path and ultimately what you do today? So if you could just share with the audience your origin story.
Yeah, happy to. So I grew up in a very small town of Park City, Utah. It is now a very big tourist ski town, but at the time it was just a very small town, just a post office and a grocery store. So it's evolved a lot over the years, but my parents are both from Los Angeles, the Hacienda Heights, La Puente area. So my grandparents, aunts and uncles, everyone lived in LA County. And so we would always visit. My mom worked for Delta, so it was really easy to come back to California. And I would always say, I'm going to move to California. I'm going to move to California. So as soon as I was done with college, I moved to Los Angeles when I was 23, and I got the job and then a car and then an apartment, and I just stayed. So been in Los Angeles for the past 15 years. And over those years, I worked as a national sales manager for 3 different manufacturers. So companies that are building equipment and design elements to go into, commercial buildings and residential buildings. And so I've been in a lot of different situations where I'm working on really high stake projects. We're maybe building, a $2 billion hotel in Los Angeles. So it's really around how can you get to the decision makers? How can you work on a project that might take 5 years to build? So it was a very complex sales process. I actually worked on the Yamava Hotel before it opened. So I had been to the property on a construction trailer. I think that was probably 2021 or so. I'm thinking around maybe a little earlier, pre-pandemic. But I learned a lot, and I realized that if I didn't make the jump to leave the industry and do something different, I might always stay there. So in 2022, I made the decision to start a consulting business because I had a lot of pretty unique skills with that background. And then I just really fell in love with more of the public speaking, the sales training workshops, and talking around these things that had made me successful in my role of getting to developers, getting to decision makers and hotel owners, and then influencing them to purchase my product. So I kind of figured a way that we could package this and market it and scale it to other people. And so that's kind of where I'm at today. I have a sales consulting and sales training business.
There's a lot there I want to unpack between getting to the decision makers, which is interesting. Obviously the sales component, but that move from Park City to California, it seemed like you just had an inkling to get to the West Coast. Just kind of curious back then what your mindset was. And you said you've been out here for several years now. Just compare and contrast kind of that eagerness to leave, because I think a lot of people judging careers kind of think they need to move or kind of move from where they're at. And also any thoughts looking back on that big move?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. Actually, I've never had anyone ask it, and I'm surprised at the answers that are coming in my head. I think the first thing that moving from Utah to Los Angeles is a pretty big different type of culture. LA, there's people from all over the world. They're speaking different languages. You could try any type of cuisine. Like, I think I grew a lot as a person by moving to Los Angeles. I developed a bigger view of the world because I was exposed to things that I just wouldn't have been had I not moved. But I also think that growing up, I would always just say, I'm moving to California. Like, it was just something I would, like a mantra almost. And then it happened. And the job and the car and the apartment, everything just fell into place so wonderfully. But I think it's because I had put the intention out there And it was just a belief that I was going to do it. And then it came into reality. And that's something I've been more intentionally working on is, I don't want to get all woo woo, but I have really started to learn that your thoughts can impact your actions. And then that's what impacts your reality. And so it was kind of a cool lesson to learn at a pretty young age, but I'm maybe now recently connecting the dots.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point is kind of putting that intention out there and no woo woo here. I think there's some practical examples, and I'm sure the people you interview, but also that we interview, there is this sense of kind of like putting something out there to grasp and go for a goal, right? And even though that goal might change, I think that's an important part. So sales, I'm curious on this front. So was that always something in your DNA as a kid looking back, as you think about kind of your career path? Were you kind of always someone who worked kind of in sales, or talk a little bit of that origin story of kind of where your career led, and were there any clues younger on that this was something you were passionate about or you had a natural inkling for?
It's funny. I don't think anyone ever, as a little kid, grows up and thinks I'm going to be a salesperson. Like I wanted to be an actress or a writer. And then you go to college and you realize, you got D's and C's in physics and chemistry. So I knew I wasn't going to be a scientist, but it's, okay, I can present. I'm comfortable in front of a group. I like drama. So it is interesting to take time to look back because you do see these things you were passionate about as a kid and how they translate into your skill set as an adult in your career path. So I loved drama. I was never afraid to be on stage, but that really helped me in being bold, doing presentations in front of clients, knocking on strangers' doors and asking for things. So I do like to look back and think of the skills that or the passions you enjoyed as a kid. But I do think one of the pivot points, I mentioned my mom worked for Delta Airlines. And when you work for the airlines, you have the perks of flying for free on empty seats. So you never knew if you were going to actually make it on the flight. But that often meant we never got to sit together as a family. So growing up as a little kid, I was always seated next to strangers on the planes. And I would kind of joke back when they would sell food or, give you chips and brownies or whatever snacks on the plane. I would just ask the person next to me, excuse me, are you going to eat your chips? And most of the time I would just get an extra bag of chips. But even if they wanted to keep their own chips, it just opened the door to a conversation. So I kind of feel like as a kid, being able to talk to strangers, child to adult, just gave me some skills and care for the human race, really.
So I was going to touch on that a little later, but I don't want to miss this point because, like, when I hear that, I think of small talk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I feel like so often, like for me, I've talked about this with other people. I lean a little more introverted,
Mm-hmm.
so small talk and kind of just talking. So I guess the question I have for you is that skill of sales and that skill of, I guess, just communication. I guess what words of advice would you have for people maybe younger in their career or haven't started their career? Maybe someone's listening to this and has kids. What's your approach as far as building that sales / communication / that skill set earlier on, or what some of the early reps, any nuggets of truth looking back on kind of that experience you just shared, but also maybe earlier in your career that are very foundational that help you in communication going forward?
Yeah, I think the more you can practice this, and I like to use the idea of just a simple icebreaker, like find your go-to icebreakers, whether it's weather, traffic, that's an easy one for the Californians, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be something as simple as, what a fun backpack if you're, using a plain example, but just find a way to just open the door a little bit. And then when you start to do this more frequently, you realize you're almost collecting data points. And so the more data points you have, and I think that's where moving to Los Angeles, I got to meet people from all over the world and learn about different cultures. Now I have more data points. So if you meet someone and you realize they have something in common with someone you met 2 years ago on a plane, you say, oh, I've heard of Park City, Utah. I listened to a podcast episode with a person who grew up there. So just kind of collecting the data points and almost viewing these small interactions as building your toolbox of like human data points you can pull from to establish connection. I think if you look at it more of, I don't want to say a research project, but something that's a little bit more gamified or fun. And it's like, hey, I'm just finding data points and points of connection. That takes away some of the pressure on it. And when you do it more frequently, you learn that most people are really grateful and gracious that you took the time to start, because they might be feeling just as introverted as you. So you get more confident the more you do it. And if you can do it from a way of just finding connection points that are relevant to you, but can open that door, that's going to get easier and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also find too, another one that I struggle with and I'm trying to get better at is something as simple as when you meet someone, remembering their name. Like it's not like I want to not remember their name. It's just usually as introverts, you're so focused on, okay, shake hand, make good eye contact. It's almost out of a place of like, don't mess it up. And then in the process, you're like, oh no, I forgot their name. But to your point, having those little nuggets of just curiosity, kind of small talk, usually through that process, it helps you kind of crystallize who that person is and remember their name too.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think exactly what you said, nobody's trying to forget a name, but we become so focused on our own introduction that we forget to pause and listen. So one of the things that I do when I meet new people is I try really hard to just be present and focus on what they're saying to me, and just being confident that I'll figure out how to introduce myself, because I've done it my whole life, so you have that confidence in you. But also sometimes what I will do too, if it's a trickier name, internally in my head, I'll ask myself, what is his name? Kyle. Like a couple minutes later, what is his name? Kyle. And then sometimes if you forget, it's okay to say, I'm so sorry, I forgot your name. Can you remind me? Or, it's okay. People do it.
So jumping back to the career arc a little bit, you said decision makers, but one thing I thought of, because you've worked on, you said multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar projects, throughout your career. And I guess the question is, because I'm sure there's people on here listening, slot vendors, hotel vendors, not just people in operations and casinos and entertainment, but more so even on the other side. So if you want to stand out, and this is a broad strokes question, so take it where you want, but obviously these people are looking at a lot, right? If they're making the decision of partnership or choosing your service, for you, if you were to think of like 2-3 kind of big level tips of anybody who works in sales to really differentiate themselves and truly create a true partnership, whatever that potential business opportunity is, for you, what words of advice or what comes to mind to you in that area?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kyle. I think the biggest tip that I can give, and this is what I work with on a lot of my consulting projects and sales training clients, is around this concept of how can my product or service or property, how can it add value to the other person's business or their own personal motivations. So I can give an example here. One of the companies that I was our national sales manager for, we made fire pits and fireplaces and fire elements, like just different fire features. And I think what a lot of salespeople do is they lean heavy on the features and benefits of the product. This fire pit burns 80,000 BTUs, and it's made of concrete, and the glass, you can do fire glass or lava rocks. Like, we get focused on the product features of our widget or our software. But if you can pivot it and communicate it around the business benefits of your product, that's what opens the doors to decision makers. So I like to think, how can my product or service make my client money or save my client money? So in the fire pit example, I would have hotel owners ask me all these questions. What about liability? Can you roast marshmallows on it? Like, we just get stuck in this back and forth. And I kind of just nip it in the bud and say, hey, Mr. Hotel owner, this fire pit's going to make you money. It's going to give you a marketable amenity feature to advertise on your website. It's going to give guests a place to gather. Don't worry about the fuel costs. You're going to pay for this fire pit in the first round of drinks and your food and beverage tab. So just pivoting it to how it helps their business, I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts that can open doors to decision makers and then really help establish you as a consultative partner versus a vendor and a buyer.
And that's such a great point. And a follow-up to that is, any advice or what are your thoughts as it relates to establishing even consideration? Where I'm going with this is, I think we all see it, if you're in a certain, level, or if you're kind of looking at different partnership opportunities, you get the spam emails, you get the LinkedIn cold reach outs. And to your point, so much of it is like, it dives into kind of like the new, it's not, to your point, really frame it up in a way that's digestible for me that I can really make a decision with.
Right.
So for you, if we're talking specifically about establishing even consideration, kind of like just reaching out to somebody, any words of advice on that end? Because I think that's super interesting. And more times than not, people fall super flat on that end.
Yeah, especially when you're reaching out cold. I think the biggest way that you can shift your mindset on this when it comes to opening the door is I call it ABAV. It stands for always be adding value. And if you can find ways to add value for this cold outreach, whether it's inviting them to a free webinar where they're going to learn something that they need to learn, or I heard an example recently. I was chatting with someone who's an insurance salesperson, and they were reaching out to people on LinkedIn for that person's birthday and just wishing them a happy birthday. Nobody needs to respond to that. But instead, he made a PDF of things to do when you hit certain age milestones when it comes to your, longevity planning. And he sent them a free guide unsolicited. So I think if you can think about ways that you can add value, that's going to be a big shift. I had a recent client I was working with, and he had a trade show, and he was trying to get people to come to his booth. If you walk to a trade show, we all do that, schedule a meeting at our booth, visit the booth. And what he did was he was thinking, how can I add value? The trade show was in Buffalo, New York, which was his hometown. So he put together a 2-page Word document, not even pretty formatting, just a simple document saying, if you want Mexican food, here's the best Mexican restaurants. If you want Italian restaurants, we're going to go to Niagara Falls. Here's the different links to book your tours to Niagara Falls, and just sent that to everyone. He said that he had so many people walk into his booth to thank him. The event planner thanked him. He opened 7 new accounts, and then he ran into the people at the restaurants out and about. So he was Mr. Popular, and he did it. It cost him no money. And he was able to add value and kind of show who he was as a person to establish that relationship. So if you just start thinking, how can I add value, and not ask for anything in return, just give, then it becomes more organic to start to ask for the business and pivot that ask.
So I want to stay here for a minute, because when you come and spoke to our group, and we do a segment here called the bigger picture, and I really wanted to use this, which is this abbreviation you're talking about, ABAV, always be adding value. And to me, that was one of the notes I circled. I think I've heard it before, but the way that you explained it was just like, this applies to so many things, not in just communication and sales, but in life. So I guess a follow-up question on this end would be, what do you think? Because I'm sure people might be listening to you and might be saying to themselves, Sarah, that sounds great, but at the end of the day, I'm expected to convert X amount of sales, or, especially if anyone's new or kind of a new found up that startup that, they're so hungry that they need to convert. So I guess for those who might be listening to this and saying, pushing back a little bit, where do you think people get this wrong mostly, for those, especially who are driven, who have to hit a certain quota or have a certain amount of conversions for their business?
Yeah, I appreciate this question, Kyle. I think that there has been a deprioritization of the human relationship side of sales, especially going digital. I think it has made it harder. It's harder to take people to lunch. It was hard to connect over the pandemic. So I'll give some pandemic examples. I would be on a call with a client, and some of them are prickly, we'll just be real. Some people are tough to work with. And I would find these little icebreakers of ways to try to establish connection. So one of the icebreakers I would ask during the pandemic would be, hey, how's your home office setup? What's it like working from home? And you'd learn the person works on their couch and their back hurts because they don't have, they live in New York City and they have a small thing. So after that meeting, I would send them a link to an Amazon collapsible desk that I had that I used. So it's finding these different ways of adding value from the relationship side of it, and almost removing the sales part from it at the beginning. Because at the beginning, you want to establish that you're a genuine partner and someone of integrity that people want to work with. And so as you're starting to, like, people's BS antennas are finely tuned. People know when you're coming from a place of sincerity versus self-service. I had a meeting a couple weeks ago. It was the end of June, and it was a software product. And I asked the guy if we could start mid-July, and he kind of sighed. And I said, what's the problem? And he goes, well, that just kind of doesn't help me because it's the end of the month for me. And it's like, duh, like I want to help you, but you haven't given me enough relationship equity. You don't have enough deposits in my emotional bank account for me to want to start before I'm ready. If we had a relationship built, sure. But I think that people are coming from this place of I'm a salesperson, the other person knows that, and that's okay. But if we can keep our focus on the relationship, that's what makes everything else more organic and seamless. And it really doesn't become a problem until the end. Because I think people think that their competitor is the competing service or software or property. But your true competitor is the relationship that the competitor salesperson has with your ideal client. So prioritizing the relationship is crucial because everything else becomes more organic if you can get that piece right.
Yeah, I love that point. BS antennas. I wrote that down because I feel like that's so true. Where you can, I feel like people can have a natural, almost like spidey sense of, to your point, the antenna of when you know someone's not really in it for the relationship,
Mhm.
and that just exudes from every interaction, right? And automatically, you kind of close your ears, you kind of tune them out when they're speaking, but once you can build that relationship, that establishes leverage. And then from there, good things can happen. But I feel like so often people miss that. And one last question here on the career front that I think is important.
Mhm.
So, as you were kind of honing in on these skills and these key observations that you've kind of learned through sales and building relationship, was there someone early in your career who was an influence that helped shape who you are today?
Yes, I had a great mentor. I've had many mentors. I think that's one of my skills is finding people to help me. So I take help freely and often. But I had this great mentor. His name was Jamie, and he was my boss at that fire company that I mentioned. And a lot of what Jamie taught me was around different sales techniques that are translatable in the things that we're talking about. So, how to sell to business model versus product features, how to overcome objections proactively, how to sell program benefits versus product benefits. And I can give a quick example here. Everyone loves Starbucks, but do we really love it for the quality of the coffee? I know I don't, but I like that I can order from an app, that it's the same from every single restaurant, no matter where I'm traveling. It's ready before I show up. I know the menu. I know there's one on every corner. I'm picking Starbucks not because the quality of the product, but because the program details that they have, built in their business model. And so I think a lot of what I learned from Jamie. And when I started my business, a lot of what I learned, I've, kind of packaged and marketed, but I learned it from him at the beginning. And I asked his blessing. I said, "Hey, I just want your permission and green light." And he was so supportive. And now he's a mentor who's back in my life that I can call for help. And I hadn't talked to him in maybe 7 years. So I think that's the other thing. We forget that these people in our lives are still around to help us. And it's okay that we hadn't talked in 7 years because I had a reason to reach out to him. And now the relationship is rekindled. And if I'm having a hard time closing a big contract, I can call Jamie and he'll help me talk through it. So it's been fun to see how the mentorship evolves and how they're able to really still support me at this phase in the career as well.
I love the example of Starbucks. Yeah, I feel like that's 100% true. People will pay a premium for convenience.
Hmm.
If it gives time back to them in some kind of way, they know it's there, that reliability and comfort. To your point, it's not so much the taste of the coffee, it's that convenience. So you said something that I want to double click on a little bit, which is mentors,
Hmm.
because that's probably one of the most talked about questions we get or levels of interest is just people listening to this platform, you know, they're hungry for knowledge, obviously, but like are failing to find a mentor. How do I find a mentor? For you, your approach, or maybe lessons you've learned, what advice would you give on that end for people who are seeking a mentor or someone they can learn from? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this question. I actually just did a podcast episode on 10 tips to find a mentor, so it's fresh in my brain. I think one of the biggest things, there's a lot of different tips that we can focus on here. One place that I have always found my mentors is through other people. So usually I'm not cold reaching out to someone. I I think if we can start to get comfortable sharing our goals, sharing areas or skill sets that we want to learn from, if we can start to talk to our aunts, our uncles, like anyone in our lives, it does not have to just be a work situation. That's where true mentorship has happened for me. So, quick example, my first potential client when starting my business, they wanted to negotiate stock equity in exchange for money. And I had never done that before. I never worked at a startup. So I called my friend who worked at a startup and he said, I've never done this either, but you should talk to my friend Lauren. So Lauren ends up being an amazing mentor to me. I had her on I guessed on my show. I think it was episode 18 if you want to listen to it. But the point is that if people don't know what we're working on or what our goals or passions or target that we're trying to achieve, they can't help you. So sharing what you're looking for with anyone who's open to helping you, that's going to kind of leave the door open for opportunities for connection. If anyone does connect you, I think the biggest thing is if you're the person asking for help and you get a warm introduction to someone, you have to have a good first impression, and that's digital punctuality. So if someone does a warm intro to you, you write back first, keep it short and ask for, their schedule or when it works for them. I usually would recommend if it's an email introduction, you BCC the person who did the intro so they know you took the ball and ran with it. And just, a little script I use is, hey, Kyle, thanks for the introduction to so-and-so. I'm moving you to BCC to save your inbox. So-and-so, I'm so grateful to, take the time to talk. When are you free? I'll schedule a Zoom. Make it easy for people to want to work with you. And then once they do help you, I report back to them. I say, hey, I took your advice. I closed that deal. Hey, I did this presentation. Here's pictures from the event. So finding the way to give that feedback, that's another piece that it's really important. And then I have one other tip on this one. In this concept of ABAV and always be adding value, if you're reaching out to mentors who are in your industry or not, find other ways to add these bank account deposits. How can you add value? Maybe it's saying, hey, I worked with your team and so really knocked it out of the park. Give a compliment, write a review on their podcast. Say, hey, the Next Level Careers podcast impacted me here, here, and here. I love the show. Like, find ways to promote your mentors, buy their books, share their content, because then you have these emotional bank account deposits. It's going to be easier to ask for help.
There's so many good things there. And something that came top of mind for me is especially around the mentor conversations, specifically within careers. I think this all is related to everything that we're talking about, which is if you approach it transactional, like, for example, I come in to a boss or a supervisor, and the first thing I say is I want to be promoted, right? Or I want to be promoted. How do I get there? It's good to show ambition. So I'm not saying don't do that. But you go a lot longer, at least in my opinion, to your point about building value. Is you're someone who's truly curious, you truly want to get better, understand there's context to that conversation. But when you really approach it to, I think what we're saying here, which is relationship and adding value versus transactional, I just feel like you get so further ahead. And I think that applies to the mentorship angle, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. People are happy to help when there's reciprocity and when they see you actually listen to them and applied their advice. Another thing that I think when we're talking about identifying what skills or areas you want to work with, if you go to your boss and you say you want a promotion, maybe you already know that you need these 3 areas that might not make you the best candidate for that promotion. So maybe instead of finding one mentor who checks every box, most of them don't, you find one mentor for this skill set, one for this, and one for this. And if you can kind of go into it making your goals clear, hey, I'm looking to learn more about what you do in this area of the business. Can I shadow an upcoming call that you have? Or can I help you on an upcoming project? That's a lot easier to say yes to because it's a clear ask and they understand what you're asking.
Yeah, that's such a great point too. And I heard this quote from Brene Brown. She was talking about, she was debating if she's creative or not. And she ultimately came to the journey where she does feel like she is creative. And it's only because her web is wide enough, so to speak. Meaning she has so many different sources of inspiration from creative that she can innovate based on that, right? That she has this large mosaic of examples. So it's not so much that she's thinking of something creative out of her own head, but she has this wide net to pull from. And I think that's totally related to what you're saying as well, as it relates to mentors. It's important to have 1 or 2 really good mentors, but man, do you really start to level set yourself up if there's multiple peoples you can pull from. Because to your point, even your greatest mentor has blind spots, just like we all do. We're all not perfect. So the more that you can grab from multiple people, I think that's just so helpful.
Yeah, you have all your data points in a row. And you get
Yep.
your little roster going because you can't ping your mentor every 5 minutes. You got to spread
Right.
out the favors.
100%. So prospecting on purpose, the name, the title, that's the name of your podcast. So if we could, maybe we can unpack that a little bit as far as what that means to you when you say prospecting on purpose and how that could be helpful for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah, I look at prospecting as kind of synonymous with business development and relationship building. It's really around kind of the beginning part of the sales cycle, which is really where I liked to always stay in. But when you're prospecting on purpose, you're doing it with intentionality. And so there's a lot of ways that I think people, especially in sales roles, it's like you're going through the motions, but you're not getting the results you want. And if you take the time to just identify what is your intention with this activity, that's going to help move the needle and get you to the next step. So, quick example, let's say, Kyle, I wanted to take you to lunch. Yes, the relationship part is an important part of the lunch. Like breaking bread with clients is important, but I want to be able to go into that meeting saying, all right, with Kyle, I want to accomplish these 3 things. I want to thank him for having me as a next level speaker. So I'm going to bring him a thank you card. I want to ask him, X favor and this thing. Like I'm going into the lunch with a plan of the outcome. And that can even be applied to anything. If you're going into a networking event, if you're going into a meeting with your boss to ask for a promotion, like what are your intentionalities behind it? Because you have the vision and the goal that's going to help get you to the next step of the sales cycle. So it's really about consciously going through the activities versus just spinning your wheels.
How often do you think people throughout your careers, from you witness, how often are people getting that wrong or just spinning the wheels, as you say?
Think a lot of the time. And I think it's because we're so focused on what our own goal is, which is okay. That's the whole point of what we just unpacked. But if we can come from it with a place of like always be adding value, that's what's going to shift it for us. So I have a quick example I can share. I'm working with a client in Boston and he's like old school, just an old school Boston guy in the nicest way I can say that. But he, likes this concept of adding value because he is looking at like a bank account. So there's money behind it. So now it's worth his time. These are his words. But he made a comment to me. He said, in the past, I would just have this wall up and I wouldn't give people the time of day until they gave me a purchase order. And then one day I'm talking to someone and she tells me she's going on vacation. And I heard your voice in my ear and I said, where are you going on vacation? And he said, they spent 20 minutes talking about her trip, talked nothing business related, didn't talk about his product. He got back to his desk and he had a project in his inbox from her and a request for a meeting with lunch presentation to her team. And he called me. He's like, I can't believe it. 20 minutes of BSing got me this far. And I said, yeah, it's not that hard. But I think that people have their wall up because they're focused on what their goal is, which is okay. But you have to put the relationship piece first because then the goal becomes a lot easier to ask.
So, question on this front, and I didn't have this written down, but it just came to my head as you were saying that. What role does self-awareness, but also not only just self-awareness, but awareness of your potential client or the person that you're pitching business to or trying to establish a relationship with? Where I'm going with this is I feel like people have core personality differences, meaning some people are more talkative in nature. They like to, talk it up, small talk. Other people's are, I think of like the DISC profile, more of a D, like whatever we're here to do, let's get to that. So just broad strokes question on this front, but for you, how do you advise people or approach the role of self-awareness, but then also the role of, to the much of your ability, knowing the personality type of the person you are engaging with?
I love this question because I think that self-awareness is an area where people neglect because it feels like a soft skill or a soft like it's an area where we don't always give ourselves permission to spend time. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But if you can get really comfortable with who you are, and that could be your values, your passions, your core competencies, what makes you special, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? Like you can spend some time and get clear on that. That to me is really what builds your authenticity and your like authentic self. But when you understand yourself, you can show up a lot more confidently. And it makes a lot of sense because self-awareness is and self-worth, those are key components in confidence. But I think that people think if they come across confident, it's going to come across as arrogant or they have a big ego. But if you're self-assured in who you are as a person, that ego and arrogance just kind of dissipates. And so only confidence can shine through. So I do think there's a lot to be said about spending time understanding your own self awareness. But I'm someone who's very bubbly and chatty and like wants to chit chat and, schmooze and do the whole dog and pony show. But if I'm talking to a hotel developer who's busy, I'm not going to ask him, where he's going on vacation. I might after the meeting, but I don't always start with the fluff. I usually try to meet them where they're at. But I think to your point, Kyle, when there's personality differences, what really helps find connection is if you can understand your own personal values, but understand the other person's values too. So maybe they value punctuality or detail, like attention to detail. If I can kind of understand their values, we can find connection points, even if we have nothing in common from like a personality standpoint.
That's such a great point, is understanding that alignment and the values. On the self-awareness front, any recommendations for you? Because I was listening to a podcast, I think it was a Simon Sinek or somebody, and he was saying that he would always tell people, like, I'm so self-aware, like, I know myself pretty well. I'm a fantastic listener. And then somehow he ended up taking a listening test of some sorts. And what he found was he's a very good listener at people in the workplace or business relationships. Where he struggled mightily was his closest circle of friends and relationships, which I thought was very interesting. So I guess for you, any tips as your discovery of self-awareness, if people are thinking either one, I need to do a better job in this front, or two, maybe they might have some blind spots, any tips or recommendations that relates to having better self-awareness?
Yeah, I think spending some time to understand your values is a big one. And the way that you can do this, I think first there's different buckets of life. So it's interesting with the Simon Sinek example, the way we show up at work, we may have totally different values than how we show up as a parent or a spouse or a child, right? So take some time to look at these different buckets of life. Maybe it's health and wellness or spirituality and religion. Take these different areas of life and look at a values list and identify maybe your top 3 or your top 5 and write them down and put them in your office for a while, because I think that really helps you be clear in your choices. And when you're clear in your choices, that continues to ensure you're acting in alignment with your values. And that's how confidence can also shine through.
Sarah, I want to pivot here just a little bit. So as you look going forward, you've had a great career, obviously the work that you're doing, the podcast, the public speaking. But when I say what gets Sarah energized, when you think about like the next 10 years, kind of what's the pep in your step? Kind of what's that, whatever you're willing to share here. But as you think the next 10 years out, what are you excited about the most?
It's really funny because I feel like this answer is way different now than it would have been 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think the pandemic was a particular catalyst for me in working on some of my own personal development because I lived in LA County. We were stuck at home. I lived by myself. So there was a lot of time to meditate and journal and like do these things that you don't exercise, like do these things that you don't always have time for. But I do think that it really taught me. And then being an entrepreneur and starting my own business has really jump started this. I've gotten comfortable with taking action and not knowing where the path is going to lead. But the more I keep doing it, it's almost my favorite analogy is if you're afraid of the unknown or what's in front of you, it's like you're looking at this darkness in front of you. You're holding a flashlight. The only way the path is going to appear is if you keep taking steps forward. And so I did that during the pandemic. I did it when it was resigning from my job and starting my business. As I've been starting the business, taking these steps, I have found that where I think I'm going, the how I'm getting there doesn't really matter because the path always appears. I just need to keep taking steps forward. And when I started the business, I thought my clients were going to be B2B salespeople and commercial manufacturing because that was my background. But they didn't really always want what I was selling. But all of a sudden, the luxury hospitality industry opens up for me. And that's something that industry does care about the human connection. They do care about relationships and value that. What an amazing thing that now my client's going to be the luxury hospitality industry. That was, the universe working for me, but I would have never figured it out if I didn't just start taking the steps and making mistakes and trying it. So what gets me excited is honestly the unknown. Like, I don't know what 10 years is going to look like, but I know if I just keep taking the steps forward and trying stuff, the path's going to show up for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of related a little bit too, as an analogy I like to use with my kids and just people on this front is the mountain analogy, right? So I don't know if anyone hikes out there, likes to hike, but if you do, there's times when you look up, and that could be the metaphor for your goal, and you feel just defeated. It's like, oh, that's so far, that's not obtainable. But to your point, how do you climb a mountain? One foot at a time, one step in front of the other, right? Just little by little. Don't get so focused and defeated on whatever some of your macro goals or dreams may be. Just put one foot in front of the other, and ultimately, what you find, the best views come from the hardest climbs as it is. So, but not to weigh yourself down and sometimes feel defeated. It happened to me literally this week. I'm like, ooh, it's gonna be one of those weeks, right? But just one day at a time. It actually is not that bad, and I think that's great advice on that front.
Kyle, can I add to your mountain analogy?
Absolutely.
I love that. I used to do the one bite at a time, eating the elephant, and I like the mountain one much more. But it's also on the mountain, there's people ahead of you on the mountain that you can lean to for help. And there's going to be people behind you that you can pull along too. So it's like back to our mentors, looking at people who've already climbed the mountain, following them helps too.
Yeah. And also on that front too, everyone goes at their own pace. Like sometimes you feel like you're going to kill it that day and you just don't have it. And that's okay. Give yourself some grace and, you'll get there. Well, so many good things here. And, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I feel like you're someone who's very intentional, very thinking about where they're trying to go. So for you, as I say, what's your pull or motivation day in, day out that keeps you energized? What is that for you? What's your pool, would you say?
Yeah, I've just figured it out kind of recently. And it's funny you mentioned Simon Sinek because when I started the business, I was working with different consultants to do my branding colors or my website. I'd work with different companies to help me. And everyone kept saying, what's your why? What's your why? You got to start with why. And I understand that's important. Like it makes sense. It's the same concept of selling business model or programs. It's the why behind why you're doing something. But I wish somebody would have told me it's okay to not know your why because the path's going to appear. And so I did my first big in-person training was a couple of years ago in Austin, Texas. And we did the presentation. And during a break, I had two different people pull me aside and say, you've changed my life. And I had never had that type of compliment before. And I was really dorky. I didn't know how to respond. It really kind of threw me off the rails because I didn't know how to respond because I never had that type of compliment. But all of a sudden, it's like, wait a second. If I know ways to help people, I know I can teach people how to make more money in whatever roles they're in. I can help their sales skills. Then it feels a little bit more of a duty. Like I'm not selling something. I'm offering a service that can help other people. So I think that having that impact shift has been really special to uncover, but it took me a while to figure it out. And so that's something I actually built. I know we do a video version of this, but I have a poster board in my office. And whenever anyone helps me in my business, or if anyone, reaches out and says, oh, I learned this from your podcast, I have a poster. I can try to show it to you, Kyle. Can you see that on the wall there?
Oh yeah.
So you and the Yamava team are going to be on it. I just barely got back, so I haven't added you to the 2024 board, but keeping a list in like a visual representation of the people who helped me and the people who I've helped, that ends up being my motivation because these people believe in me. They've, invested in me. They've hired me. They tell me to keep going. That's been really cool. So if you're listening and you have someone in your life who's inspiring you, I would encourage you to reach out to them because you never know. They might be writing your name on a little heart Post-it note and sticking it on their whiteboard to keep going. So I think just giving that feedback And that positivity and support wherever you can. It doesn't have to cost money. That's a really easy way to add that value in that emotional bank account deposit.
And I also like that you hit on too, like that there's so many things there, but I'm aligned with you when it comes to the question of why. Also, too, I differ a little bit. There's a lot of people out there, even people that I work with, who always say, like, find your passion. I feel like that's a very heavy thing. Like, sometimes you're like, what if I don't know what it is? Right. And then it's like, well, just start trying stuff. And I understand all that. But I think for me, what's been very helpful is just really do some inward reflection and start to understand where you get energy. Right. I think that will help cue you in to find your passion or whatever you call it, where you'll find alignment for your work. Because I agree, like starting with why, that's very powerful. I agree. But sometimes that can be daunting. And also, I think it relates to careers when people say, well, find your passion. Well, it's like, I might not know my passion. And I think some of those, that inward work, but then also just understand what gets you energy, I think will put you on the right path. And I love the visual representation you have there. And it's clear that's in your DNA as far as always providing value or always adding value. I think you demonstrate that through and through. I'm also just curious, are you a visual person? Are you someone who just takes notes and kind of puts things on the wall?
Oh yeah. I have every quarter I call them my big rocks. Like what are my top 3 goals to work on that quarter? And I put it on a piece of butcher paper behind me on the wall because I have the space, and I just physically go up and cross it off, because I think when you're trying to achieve a goal, you're climbing the mountain, you have to set little deadlines for yourself to keep it moving forward. But it's okay to not know the how. But yeah, I have all sorts of things, quotes everywhere, affirmations. I have a little thermometer that I fill up with money. It helps me, like, oh, okay, the business is making money. So, but I think that came from the impact board. And it's funny, Kyle, over the weekend, I found a box of old cards, apparently from age 7, my first communion, to high school graduation. I kept every card that people had given me. And I do not remember doing this. It took me like 3 hours to go through it. I have a whole garbage bag full of cards that I tossed, but I kept some. But I think that like tangible piece has gone away. And I think that's what we need to start bringing back, is how can we find ways to connect with people a little bit more like tangentially, because that's what's going to help, just especially in the age of AI and all of these technologies and remote work, like finding these different connection points, however it works for you, is going to be something that is always going to add value to your life.
Yeah, I can relate on that front. I find that most people are visual, even if they say they're not. So there's a reason why it sometimes, and I can't draw at all. Anybody who works with me can make fun of the way I draw, but it's helpful to visualize things, right? So just to make sure that we're crystal clear on whatever it may be. It could be a project, it could be whatever it may be. And then 2, something about taking notes and writing things down. That is very tangible. 1, you can come back to it. But then 2, in the process of actually writing it down, it helps you kind of sync with you more. So there's a lot I can relate there. Sara, I want to thank you for joining the podcast. I have a couple last questions here, a little more quick in nature. But I think this one's always insightful. So if you were to, let's say Sara first started her career, right? When you really started moving in your career, if you were to talk to that person, your younger self, and provide any words of wisdom, and you only had 30 seconds to do it. So it's a real quick, here you are, and then you're going to bounce. So you got to keep it brief. What kind of words of advice would you give to your younger self?
Okay, in 30 seconds, I would say that everyone has their own view of reality. And so your view of how you're interpreting whatever is happening in front of you is okay. That's your view. But if you can take the time to look at it from the other person's perspective, and maybe even a third party perspective, or like the perspective of God, if you believe in God, like take those 3 angles, and that's going to diffuse any, not all, but it will make you understand the other person's perspective, have more empathy, dissolve any irritation or frustration or resentment or whatever feelings you may be having if something's not going your way. Look at it from your angle, but also the other person's and a third party, and just kind of chill out a little bit more. Like we all just get all hyped up on like what's happening to us. And it's like, no, take some time and look at it from other angles, because the shift in perspective has been very powerful for me. And I wish I had learned it a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate there. And usually when you're younger, you don't have that sense of perspective. And also, too, it's something I'm still trying to get better at, but not to go woo woo again, but sometimes the ego starts to take over. Like
Wow.
you get anger and it's like, who do they think they are? And you deserve this. And you keep scorecard of the things. And I think for me, I can relate. That's been a big shift and I heard it, I can't remember where, but like put the scorecard away. Um,
I like
I,
that.
I think that's huge. Um, for you, what's capturing your attention? So you work with a lot of different hospitality brands, you work with a lot of different vendors. So just kind of no guardrails to this question as you think about things that lately are piquing your curiosity. It could be on a personal front, it could be on a professional front, whatever it may be. What comes to mind when I say that?
Think there's going to be a shift because everyone, AI, it's like it's here. We're in it and it's not going away. I think what's going to be really interesting from both a business and a personal side of things is companies that can figure out a way to prioritize the human piece first and then use technology to support it if that's what they want. I think that's what's really going to change the game for things because consumers, guests, we're all craving it. I was in Chicago last week for work and this man was telling me about this bookshop and I think it was called Kibitz Nest Books. It's a bookshop and it's a bar. And he's talking about how cool it is. And the first thought that I had was, oh, I wonder if that'd be a good place to work. And before I could ask him, hey, can I pull out my laptop there? He says the best part about it is that there's no Wi-Fi. Computers aren't allowed. It's a Wi-Fi free zone, not a free Wi-Fi zone. And I think that it was alarming to me that my first internal thought was, oh, maybe I could work there while I'm in Chicago. It was like, no, it's a place to read your book, play board games, have conversations with people. I think people are craving that. And from the hospitality space too, I think that that's going to be the difference of the hotels and the properties and the businesses that really scale and differentiate themselves versus the ones who don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you kind of answered it there, but when we think about hospitality specifically, and you're right, there's so much buzzwords on AI, and so many of the S&P 500 companies find that if you put in their quarterly earnings statement, if I put AI in there, it's like, oh, maybe there'll be a boost. And there's a lot of inflated stats and kind of commentary around AI. But for you, as you think 6 years out ish, 2030 and beyond, what do you think the hospitality industry looks like? What's the same and what might be different?
I think it's a lot of the same, but maybe significantly more elevated when it comes to finding your own organization authenticity. And I just stayed the Amava last month, and you guys did such a great job of weaving in a lot of authenticity throughout and like prioritizing that human connection piece. So, especially with like remote first work life and just people in this digital space, I think we're going to see a lot more like in person company retreats to get teams together because they're going to start to realize where the crumbles are falling is this lack of human connection. I think we're going to see more like group trips and family trips and more like using hotels and hospitality environments as a destination to establish connection points. So I think that there's going to be more of the in-person group stuff. But if we can incorporate the human elements, like I'll share examples from the Amava property. You guys had this amazing magazine. I took it home with me. But I also read it throughout my stay there. I stayed there for 2 nights. And the magazine, Kyle? I'm showing it up here.
Yeah,
How do I
Humming Up
bring it?
magazine. Yep.
Okay, that's what I would have said. I mean, I felt such a connection to the property and to the tribe as a guest because I could see and read about the current things that they were doing. The property was on the reservation, so you can kind of imagine the history and the growth on site. But I could also see it in the people on staff too. So I was chatting with someone in guest services, and they had on pink shoes. I said, "Oh, those are fun shoes." And she said, "Yeah, we have a funky shoe day because we have a summertime shoe drive that we do. And if you want to bring a pair of shoes," and it was just such a cool, like when we think about value alignment, it's like, oh, okay, this is a place that I want to stay. And this is a place that I want to spend my money on because I know if I'm going to gamble and I'm going to lose it, part of it's going to charity, part of it's going to philanthropic things, because I understand and felt those values throughout the whole site. So I mean, when you're talking about finding ways of connection, I was so impressed. You did an amazing job. The team did an amazing job. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there on how can we pull that into our own businesses and our own like personal brands as we work with others in the world.
Two things that really stood out to me, and I'm sure you can relate to this because I think you spoke at the Forbes Travel
Mhm.
Guide Awards. Two things I've really taken from them is number one, and it's kind of on your 2030 point, which is an ultimate experience, guest service experience takes the thinking out of it.
Mhm.
And to me, we can think about automation, we could think about AI, but there's nothing that substitute just that connection and someone just giving you great service, you know, providing you something, whether it's as simple as when you go to a restaurant, giving them the side options, don't even let them look, right?
Mhm.
And those little golden nuggets of making that guest experience personalized and that human element, that's not going to go away. I think that's still going to be there. And then another thing they talk about, which was on your shoe point. So yeah, we're doing a sneaker drive here at Yamava, trying to collect as many sneakers we can for kids going back to school, because there's a lot of kids out there who don't have new shoes, right? They're wearing shoes that don't fit them. So that's something that's in the DNA of the tribe and something we're looking to support. And they say, does the story make sense? I think is roughly what they say, right? So if you're going to have different shoes, there has to be a purpose to it, right? Or
Mhm.
your uniform, or the way that you design your menu, or whatever it may be. And that's something, especially working in marketing, I've tried to take with me is, does the story make sense, right? Intentionality. I feel like all of this is coming
Mhm.
full circle, and purpose. I feel like it all weaves into what we're talking about here today. So, Sarah, I have two final questions for you. The first one being on the personal side. So, beyond all the awesome wisdom that you've provided here today, what's Sarah do for hobbies? How do you kind of disconnect so that you're energized in everything that you do day to day?
I read a lot. I'm a big reader. So I now on Spotify, you can listen to audiobooks too. So I have two, but like a heavy book I'm reading on my Kindle and then a light book when I am going on walks. So that's been great. I recently just moved back to Park City. And so I got into skiing. I've been doing more hiking. I'm trying to lean into some of the outdoor activities you're able to do in a small town. And then hanging out with friends. I feel like finding opportunities to connect and just be present is it takes time and intentionality. It takes a lot of effort to maintain friendships with family and friends, but carving out that time is one of my core values. And so I make the time to do it. So friends and family.
Yeah, and I also too just want to thank you for not only just speaking to our group at San Manuel and Yamava, but you practice what you preach, right? Like you try to deposit those emotional bank accounts. I know you provided gifts to a lot of the different San Manuel staff and Yamava staff. You gave me some jelly and some candy that my kids love, by the way. So that's what's awesome too, is everything that you talk about, you live, and I highly recommend for those listening. Sarah's an amazing speaker. Make sure you listen to her podcast. But Sarah, I'm going to get you out on the question we ask everybody, which is, this platform is all about trying to help people, get to the next level of their career, whatever that looks like for them. And then also in that process, just become better, right? On the personal level and professional level. So for you, if you're going to write 3 tips on, hey, here's how you take your career to the next level, what would those 3 tips be for you?
I think nobody's going to be surprised on this one, but ABAV, always be adding value, whether it's compliment or maybe you're giving your boss feedback on a meeting that just had or an idea you want to raise your hand for and try. Maybe somebody really just helped you and you're emailing their boss and saying so-and-so is such a rock star. Like maybe it's leaving a 5-star review. We already gave that example, but just find ways to add value always, because that's going to give you that muscle memory and that's going to help you with the other tips. So when you're asking for feedback, you're asking for help. It's not always easy, but if you ask and people offer to help you and you want their help, say yes and take it, and then express gratitude and share how that expertise. So I'd say be comfortable in asking for help and being vulnerable and asking for help, because people will want to help you. And then the last piece I want to leave, the last tip would be this ability to execute. So it can be a small thing like helping a colleague clean up after a team party or larger scale projects. Like if you have an idea that you think is going to impact the business that you work for in some way, try to get buy-in from anyone who needs to give you buy-in. But if you can bring that idea into reality and actually execute, there's a lot of people that are action talkers and action takers. And it's not just about taking action, but it's taking action and then executing. And that's what's going to set you apart. That's what's going to get you that promotion. Even if the results are not what you wanted or were expecting or hoping for, you're going to learn something from it and you're going to get stronger for next time. And you're going to be known as someone who has ideas, but takes risks, takes action, and executes. So figure out a way to get comfortable asking for help, executing, and always be adding value.
Love it. Well done is greater than well said. And those are awesome 3 nuggets to end with. Sara, once again, just thank you again for taking the time. I found this valuable, and I know our audience will as well.
Thank you, Kyle. It's my pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
Check out more episodes at thenextlevelcareers.com.
Yay.